Welcome, everyone, to another episode, to season 2 of Masks of Masculinity. We finally have a name for this thing. And today we are speaking with another, actually, I think you've been a long-time member, but you've only recently started coming to meetings. Is that correct, Doug?
Yeah, I've only been to one so far, and that's really on me. But I love the idea behind it, and it's nice to know that there's kind of a support group, I guess you could say.
Exactly. And you can choose your level of
thank you for having me.
Of course. Do you want to tell the group a little about yourself?
Sure. I am a 32-year-old in Brooklyn, which covers, like a huge swath of people who are probably leaving right now. But let's see. I am a video person, video editor, video host. I shoot video. That's like basically my life. That covers a lot of both what I do and who I am, what I've been doing with my life years now. I've worked in kind of video production, some TV, commercials, music videos, stuff like that. And I don't mean to make it sound like a little pitch. It's just that it does happen to define a lot of what I've done with myself. And I've definitely thought about that a lot. What defines you? What does your job define you? Does your career define you day to day? And it's not that I'm disappointed with similar those answers are, but it's I don't know, it's eye-opening in a way. It does lead me to believe that there's a little more enrichment that I need in my life, if that makes sense. As far as what else I do, I am trying to get back into music. It was kind of a part of me when I was a teenager, and I just dropped it. I dropped it because, as I'm sure many people are aware, it is a thankless endeavor for a lot of people. It is very competitive, which I'm not. And definitely props to those who are, amazing at it. But I think the thing I didn't realize when I stopped doing it was that you can do those things as part of your own personal enrichment rather than just, for competition or jobs or whatnot. And I'm sure that that's a whole conversation to have on what we value in this society, at least, what we value as how we contribute to it. But the point I was making is that I'm kind of trying to rediscover older hobbies and integrate them into my life now, especially since we have all this free time at home now. It's kind of nice. I won't lie. There is that aspect to it.
And into that, does that make it easier do you think that makes it easier to connect with other people at this time? Or is it actually more difficult because maybe you are more of an in-person person?
It's complicated. So when I was younger, I definitely was, and I still am to a degree, but I definitely was way more of a, like a super introverted, always at the computer, computer nerd, I'll just say it. That's what I was, growing up. It's kind of funny now because a lot of the ways that I see younger people, when I say younger, of course, I mean like 15 years younger than me, going online and doing everything online. It's, to me, I was already kind of like that. So it's not totally weird to me to see everybody, making the most of themselves on social media now. It's actually not that weird to me at all. But what is weird is, or at least different, is that I wasn't really breaking out of introverted habits until like 25, 26. So I was kind of a late bloomer in that regard. And what that means is that I've kind of like had to go back on a lot of those behaviors that I've tried to undo. So like I stopped talking online for the most part. Not that I didn't post online, but I used to be on like IRC a lot. I used to be on internet forums a lot. I would chat more online with people on Skype, or back in the day, MSN Messenger or AIM. So it was like I'd have long conversations, with people back then, and I considered myself more fluent talking online. Now, the problem isn't so much that it's in person or not. It's that I'm kind of entering I guess you could say a hobby that I'm behind on understanding in comparison to other people. A lot of people, when they go into something like music, or they go into whatever their passion may be, they've presumably already got a few years under their belt of kind of being culturally ingrained in it, whether that be from school or a parent or their peers who train them in something like that. And I'm not sure how it would have played out if 2020 went normally and I were to kind of put myself out there and try to talk to people in person. I'm actually not sure how that would have played out. I'm not sure if I would have felt uncomfortable by the difference in experience, or if maybe this is better. The problem with it is that you should try to meet these people in person, especially for something like music. The idea of it is you ideally want to swap ideas and be creative with them. And it's hard to do that online if you don't already have an understanding of the process in person. So I was really hoping to kick off last year with trying to go to open mics, go to meetups for people who were kind of like amateurs at this. I really wanted to try to take a step into that world, which I had previously been very apprehensive about doing, and that kind of got sidetracked. Yeah, it's I don't know. I can't say I have any conclusion on if it's harder or easier in person or online. I have no idea.
And that is perfectly okay. It's okay to live in areas of gray, I think. And speaking of that, I feel like when you were 17 and I would have been like 15, and I was also very introverted, but I remember, and I don't know if this is the same for you, but I remember my online personality was very compartmentalized versus my everyday personality. Not to say that I didn't have the same voice for both. I was authentic for both, but I was able to make a distinction between the two.
Right.
And today, I don't know if people coming up with the internet right out of the womb, if they're ever going to be able to make that distinction between the digital and physical world as much. And that's not necessarily a bad or a good thing. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I have thoughts that are probably going to simultaneously make me sound very old, and what else? Like, I don't know, just very old. My thoughts on it are that I'm really grateful for how easy it is now to exist online, and the fact that it's not considered like a weird thing anymore. I think part of that compartmentalization is that there was kind of stereotyping, or at least just dismissal over, oh, you heard about that online, you spoke to them online. Either people thought you were talking to a predator, or you were just talking to like a nobody, somebody who just wasn't even there, or just pretending to be somebody else. And it's, I don't know, it's troubling because that forces you, I'm sure I speak for both of us in this case at least, I think that's why we had to do that back then. It wasn't so much that we had to keep it secret, but it's like people just wouldn't understand, I guess. I don't know how to phrase that. And now it's a given to be online, and not only be online, but be vocal online, spout your honest opinions and truths, and form entire brands, which is kind of a disgusting concept to me, but here we are. The difference now, I think, is that because they have smartphones at their disposal, it's never really going to be turned off, and that's fine. I'm honestly okay. I know people really get weary of this constant phone usage, and don't get me wrong, I know it's bad to doom scroll all day. I know it's bad to read rigid half-thought opinions on social media. I understand that, and I do know that there's definitely a vortex that you can get consumed in. But at the same time, there are so many good things to have come out of it. So many different types of people that are maybe similar to you, who you could meet online. And you realize there's tons of people like that out there. And maybe you could meet them in person. Who knows? There's also entire libraries upon libraries of information on learning anything. And it's so much easier now to do something and get started in something at a very serious level, I feel, just by watching YouTube videos, which is even better than the pure text we had to read online, which was already a huge convenience. We had, websites that were dedicated to this. They have people showing you multiple camera angles, people commenting on what they might have messed up, and it's I don't know. You could learn anything, be anything. I love it. I have very mixed feelings on the current scorn, I guess, for the internet, but at the same time, I understand where it comes from, because I do think it's been kind of corrupted in a sense. It definitely, at least I don't remember there being as much hate when I was younger, but I think maybe it was there all along and now it's just louder. I don't know. There's a lot of thoughts with it. There's a lot of tangents we can go on with what is the internet now versus what was it even 10 years ago.
Something that came to mind, a little meme that I think could sum a lot of this up, comes from The Simpsons, where I think it was like post season 5, but before season 10, and the Radioactive Man film is coming out, and Bart and Milhouse go to see Comic Book Guy.
Yeah.
For some reason, and he's talking with them about the film, and they're like, "Who's playing Radioactive Man?" He's like, "I will let you know in 10.7 minutes." And he goes on the internet, and it's this network of essentially nerds talking to each other, and then it ends up at this one nerd who's sitting under the table in the boardroom as they're discussing who's going to be the actor for the Radioactive Man film. And it paints this picture, I think, of what you were just talking about, of how much information there was online, but there was also this stigma of who was online.
Yeah, exactly.
So you were interested in last year and now moving into this year, really learning music, but you saying that it's a little difficult to do online, but it's also easier to learn things online. So where is music falling in that for you? You talked a little bit about how it's difficult to connect. Maybe I'm getting the wrong impression here, because I've seen so many examples of people coming together to create music, like through those Zoom concerts and things like that, which I know takes a lot of professionals, both on the front-facing side and behind the scenes. But I also know that I've also heard of people giving lessons right now. I have a friend, Steven, who is giving piano lessons digitally. Could you expand a little bit more upon why it's been so difficult for you in this experience?
Yeah. I think part of it is, well, out of the gate, I'll just say, like, definitely could practice way more. So I totally accept a large portion of the, responsibility for just not pushing myself as hard as I should to learn. However, so by the way, I'm trying to kind of simultaneously learn piano and I guess more voice right now, because I would like to sing. And the thing is, I've never actually done it before. I've never done it in school. I never did it. I was never in chorus. I never did musical theater. I never did pretty much anything related to that. I did play saxophone in high school, so I was involved in music. I did, I did learn to sight read decently, and I did learn some basic musical concepts, and I stuck with it until I graduated. And I actually really started to care about it. Like, I was kind of being very lackadaisical up until, I would say, 9th grade, and honestly that goes for like all of my education. But after that, I kind of just took it much more seriously. It really resonated with me. I did that up until I graduated, and then I stopped. But around, I want to say maybe 3 years ago, I figured, all right, well, maybe I should try to get more into like digital music, because it's hard to do stuff here in an apartment, as you know. It's hard to practice. And I thought, well, maybe piano would be good because, one, it's a very transferable skill. You can play it on a digital keyboard and then use that to play a lot of other instruments via a computer. But two, for that very same reason, you can play it on headphones, and you can, keep that to yourself and not have to worry about the volume or the mistakes that you make, whatnot. So there was that aspect to it. And about 2 years ago, I did finally buy myself a digital piano. And I also started at the same time just kind of messing around in Ableton, which is a digital audio workstation. And I had no idea what I was doing in both regards. I had no idea what I was doing on the piano, and I had no idea what I was doing in the software, because I've never done any kind of audio work, really. It's not my field. I'm on the other side. And it's funny, actually. When I was a teenager, my teacher for video at the time, he previously was a musician, I believe, and then he switched out of that. And he said, "Oh yeah, that's super common. Everybody does that." I'm like, "Oh, interesting. I guess I'm kind of fulfilling destiny in that way." But some of the principles I knew on the technical side, and so in that sense, it's been a little easier. And the reason I have this recording set up is because of that. It's actually not just because of that. It's because I also wanted to do voiceover work. And 2 years ago, I did take classes in that, but I then realized pretty much as soon as I was done with the lessons that I would have had to go down the road of an actor. And I don't want to do that, to be honest. It's not that I have any judgment on that. It's more that I see what a lot of actors deal with in terms of jobs and stress over it, and I'm sure it's an absolutely fulfilling thing, but without the background in it, like I was saying before, without the earlier educational experiences and the earlier connection to it, it was hard for me to convince myself this is something I could go along with. And that was okay with me. I'm okay with that. That doesn't bother me. But music, on the other hand, at least I could do it for myself. And then, if I want to, at some point, if I ever get good enough, I can play with people. And that could just be an enjoyment in itself. And so I started to just play more in the software. I would go on and off again for a few months, and it didn't really go anywhere. And then same thing with piano. I took a few lessons for like 2 months. And then what actually happened was the teacher I had was very young. And I think I was her first student ever. So it was no fault of hers, really. She was a great player, but very inexperienced with teaching. I just don't think she knew how to guide me and select things for me to play and stuff like that. So I was a little discouraged by that. I stopped those lessons in order to do the voiceover lessons. Fast forward, now it's 2019, I guess, and out of nowhere, I just kind of started fiddling on the piano, and I did a few melodies. And when I say I fiddled around, I mean I played the keyboard the way I say a baby boomer uses a computer keyboard, which means one finger at a time. It actually did lead to like me trying to put together music digitally, because then what I would do is write out the notes in the software that replicated what I was doing on the piano, because I wasn't fast enough to record it. I had to like write it. Yeah, I started doing that, and I've started recording stuff. It's all like very synthesizer heavy and percussive because it's the easiest stuff to program. So I've yet to be able to play anything, and I sing to it. So it's fun. I do it for myself, and I put it out there just in case people want to hear it, but who knows? And then the eventual desire would be that I can actually play again. I haven't played an instrument since back then, and I'm still not, because I'm so infrequent with my piano practice, I still haven't gotten to a point where I could play anything, really. That would be nice. That would be nice.
So really quickly, do you want to plug where people can find you? if they want to listen to
Oh
what
God,
you created?
I am technically on Spotify as Parliament Cat. On Instagram as well.
Spelled like British Parliament.
Exactly. In fact, it's based on the fact that they have a parliamentary cat. It is actually no, I'm totally serious. Go on. I forget his name. It is the Chief Mouser, I believe, is the title of the cat. And they have had a series of cats since, I want to say, at least the 50s.
Oh goodness! Now it's just another reason for me to want to move to Britain, Scotland specifically. But anyway, I want to catch on to something you said earlier that might have been a throwaway word, but just want to dig in there a little bit. It might be painful. There's no anesthesia involved, unfortunately. But you used the word when you're talking about learning to play piano and how you're using the headphones. You said doing that would allow any mistakes to just be only heard by you. Are you afraid of making mistakes?
Actually, well, with piano, not so much. I'm willing to not really care if I sound terrible on piano loudly, or rather without headphones. It's I'm more referring to like specifically very, very loud, bad, I guess, horn-based instruments. I'm thinking of how that could disturb neighbors because it's extraordinarily unpleasant to hear. Yeah, it's not in that instance. It's not so much the embarrassment. It's more like I would not want to hear that if I was next door. However, if it was pleasant, like for example, we actually have a very talented kid next door who plays piano all day. And it's actually kind of this crushing, like, wow, I should be playing for hours like him. I mean, that's nice to hear. I hear it through the wall sometimes and I'm like, oh, that's cool. You know, singing is actually probably a more applicable answer to your question because that I definitely have a very, very hard time practicing, if ever, in my own home, just because I don't want to, embarrass myself.
Not even in the shower?
In the shower, I feel would be worse because that's like definitely audible through several walls. The room I'm in right now, actually, is probably the best space to do any of that, and this too, simply because it's actually an extension of the apartment building and it has nothing above it. So it has there's no second or third floor to it, and it's pretty isolated. So I've tried as best as I can to acoustically pad it, both for technical reasons and for privacy reasons. It's just that's something where I definitely have struggled. I've only been doing singing lessons since September, and I gotta say I've barely, if ever, actually practiced at home because I've just been too afraid to do it. I'm not afraid to be bad in front of my teacher, and I guess that's because there's the context provided that, like, well, she knows this is how it is, and it's okay in this moment to be bad. And I don't know, it's hard to be out like that about that.
Why do you think that is for you?
Well, I think a lot of it probably has to come down to, I wouldn't say I'm a perfectionist by any means. I'm definitely not, but I let way too much shit slide. But I definitely have a high threshold or high bar, I guess, for what I consider to be, either worthy of putting out there or worth doing publicly. I don't know. I think my standards for how I do almost anything really are kind of like that, and it's always like, all right, well, if I can't do it this way, then I'm just not going to do it, because it's I don't know. It's not so much the failure of it that bothers me. It's really just like the eyes, the people who would watch.
Interesting. And with that in mind, is it Is it the public in general entirely, or is there someone specific that you are afraid will see those faults?
Well, I mean, the only person here who would see that is my fiance, and she is extremely supportive. So I don't think she would judge. I don't know. It's a little more inherent of a fear than that. It's not about a specific person, more about who is closest enough to hear it, I guess. Neighbors, I actually, like I said, because this room is separate, I actually don't really worry about that in here. So singing, I'm not worried about in terms of disturbing neighbors over here. Yeah, it's really just her, and it's not her fault. It's really not. It's nobody's particular fault. I think maybe if I had to like trace it way back, I would say I just have never really liked the idea of the way sometimes parents can dote on you about either doing or not doing things, but I'm not sure. And there's also always been just kind of frustrations of not, I guess, getting something or doing something right early on. It doesn't have to be the first try for me, but I feel like it's easy to get frustrated if it doesn't happen relatively quickly. Which I know is asinine because nothing like that is built up instantly, but it's hard to think about that sometimes.
Were you one of those kids who generally got good grades, things in school kind of came easy to you?
No, I actually wasn't. I've definitely heard of that issue for a lot of, supposedly called gifted kids who had that kind of experience. And I know my fiance actually has mentioned that before. I wasn't. I didn't ever have any kind of like super good. The only class I actually did pretty well in consistently for many years was, I guess, social studies related classes. And I don't know. I was good with that. And then, I mean, I was terrible at math until I wasn't. I actually got pretty good around the time that I started taking music seriously, which I actually hold as kind of like a like a hand-in-hand type thing. I feel like one must have worked the other in terms of brain region or something. But so I definitely attribute those to having like a mutual success. But no, in my like really young years, no, I didn't have like a really easy time in school. I wasn't great academically. I wasn't in any advanced courses or anything like that. I failed math once, so I had to be held back a year. I don't know. No, it wasn't like that. I am not sure what originated this thing. One of the earliest, like, I guess you could say, failure memories that I have is, and it's a super, super visual, but vague memory of being very young. I think maybe 4 or 5, no older than that. And I think I was in soccer. I was enrolled in it, I guess. My dad wanted me to do that. And I remember just like running towards the ball. No particular objective in mind other than to catch up with the ball. And then simply being outrun by every other kid and not being able to keep up the pace. And I remember that being like a pretty vivid memory, but I don't have any specifics beyond that. I don't have any context beyond that. I just remember that feeling of being outrun so easily was very hurtful. And I guess that kind of stayed for a while. I don't know. I can't say that it's a particular person or, I don't know. But just to add one more little detail, when I say like I don't like to do things until they're at a certain level, I definitely feel that has, in some sense, I don't want to make it seem like it's good or not, but in some sense that has rewarded me in my professional career. I've definitely held myself to very high standards with projects that I'm given or pieces that I'm working on, videos that I'm working on. Because I may hear or see a problem in a video, for example, I may look out the answer on Google as opposed to putting it out there as it is, incomplete, insufficient. And in the end, I might teach myself something. So it does kind of, in a way, act as a weird motivator. But it's hard to balance that.
Does it help when you maybe put a time constraint on something so that you can't constantly go back and try to edit and re-edit? Because I know I have several musician friends. One of them is an ex and now a very good friend, and he had to teach himself that. He had to teach himself to just sort of let go and let God. And I can't remember if it was his bandmate or another musician friend of his who had a solo project, and he had an EP that he wanted to put out, but he kept going back in and trying to update this thing and make it just so perfect. But that makes me think of going back to what you said earlier about how we kind of have to brand ourselves. I know you were kind of saying it a little negatively, but if you're always trying to update, you're never going to maybe get that on brand sound,
right,
or point of view across that you originally wanted. Instead, it's like you're trying to keep up with trends.
Yeah, I'm not. Luckily, I'm just too. I think I'm just too lazy, honestly, to keep up with trends. That is something where I am definitely way too old. A good example right now is I will never get TikTok, and I mean I understand the appeal, but I will never. But I will never understand the desire to put in that much time into like perfecting dances for it or having entire skits on it, which I think some people are super clever the way they do it. And I'm it's funny to see the way people are taking these tools. But to get back to what you were saying though, I absolutely relate in not knowing when to stop. I completely know what it's like to I will do. I mean, right now I'm working on a song that I've spent the majority of the time, honestly, really just figuring out how to mix it better and do better effects to it and less so on the compositional stuff. And I largely consider the composition to be mostly done, but that's mainly because it's so far out of my ability to improve upon, because I would need to be taught a lot more, that I'm willing to let that go. That doesn't bother me. Like I'm only going to get so far until I learn a lot more. Mixing, on the other hand, I feel is because it's already in my domain of being on the computer and sort of being an extension of the technical stuff that I already do with video editing and audio editing as a secondary thing. I am not afraid to just go in there and literally tweak it for hours and hours every day. And it's the problem that I face is that, well, for one, you get just fatigued by it, and you eventually lose a sense of what is, that goes for anything. You lose a sense of like what is where should I stop? What is good? What is the right approach here? But also, that I think is one of the frustrating things about not being able to talk to people in person, is not being able to, I guess, kind of learn from their own ears and eyes over how they make decisions. Like, for example, I would love to take what I have now over to somebody's house and watch what they do to it, because I'd want to see how they come to those decisions and I guess absorb that knowledge just by watching them work. And that's the kind of thing right now that I wouldn't be able to do. And, I do watch videos. I do watch people online doing these things, but it's not the same as if you had actually worked together on something and figured out the problems together and reasoned through them, and also conveyed the kind of sound you're trying to go for. Because I'm sure I don't need to mention it really, but every genre has a different sound. Mine tends to be very electronic, and so there's just different approaches, and I would love to have somebody else look at it. But in any case, the point is, yeah, I know what it's like to not be able to stop, and it's hard because already I have stuff out where literally within a week, sometimes days, I'll listen to it after I put it out, and I'm like, oh my fucking God, what does this sound like? How does it sound like this? What did I do? And especially, months later when you actually have measurably improved because you're more experienced. Then you listen back and you're like, wow, I fucked it up.
Yeah.
That is the beauty of learning. I'm totally okay with that. But it's hard to stop.
Oh, totally. I have a little drop in the bucket with this of my DJing, and I go back and listen to the first set that I ever recorded. And I did listen to it a month after I had started DJing, and I listened and I was like, oh God, this is so awful. Why did I think this was so good? But it's there, and I'm leaving it alone. And I'm like, it's something I can measure against now when I create new mixes. To jump the rails entirely, we're not even going parallel here. We're like picking up the train in France and putting it down in China. But let's talk a little bit about what brought us here today. Doug, can you give us your definition of what masculinity is to you? And remember what I said before, gray is okay.
Yeah, I never really wrestled with that question for most of my life. It was not like I was consciously, at least. Let me preface that. I was never consciously wrestling with that question. I never put it into those terms, and I think now more and more I have to really ask myself what that is, not just because I'm curious, but because a lot of the things that come to mind honestly disturb me. If I were to go, like, I guess down a list of cliche things of what it may mean, I guess, I don't know, strength, confidence, courage, maybe convictions to some sense. And then I look at those things like that, and if you look at them as neutral words, I think that doesn't sound like a good masculine person to me. That just sounds like a good person to me. Assuming when we say strength, we don't mean like malicious. We just mean like they are emotionally intelligent, or they are able to face challenges in their lives. I don't know. I look at the positives, the possible positives, things like that, and I think that just sounds like a good person to me. And I think for me personally, and I know this is probably going to maybe be like a kind of immature opinion to have. I don't know. I'm kind of self-loathing at the idea of masculinity. I'm kind of like, I don't really care about the fact that I consider myself to be a man. I do, but it doesn't mean anything to me, really. Not that much. And I don't know if that should be troubling. I don't know if it is troubling. For the most part, I haven't had great male role models, and I definitely acknowledge that. It's like and there's a lot to go into with that, but I don't know. I definitely have some male friends at this point, and it is hard actually, and I know that that's like a common thing for most adult men, is that they have a hard time building or maintaining their friendships. But I don't know. It's hard to wrap my mind around a definition that is not only positive but also, I guess, descriptive of masculinity rather than just humanity.
Right. I was going to say that it sounds like you are more humanist than gender might prescribe to you. And the sort of loathing of masculinity, does that come from a cultural standpoint, from an intellectual standpoint? What does that derive from? Can you pinpoint that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few things. The top of the list is daddy issues, for sure. I didn't have a really close relationship with my dad, and there was also a divorce involved, which had a lot of manipulation in it. I'm not afraid to go into it. It's just that it's a super long story. On top of that, I was bullied a lot as a kid. I just didn't really fit in that much. And I think culturally, if you take it a little, if you zoom out a bit, I am not alone in, but I'm also not innocent. I'm not alone and not innocent in having a lot of misogynistic beliefs when I was younger and acting upon those. Luckily, I didn't do anything terribly bad, but I've certainly, pushed women in the wrong direction. And I've definitely not had the best opinions of people. I reflect on that a lot, and I'm just like, I know I'm not that person now, but I was. And a certain environment caused that, and those people have to deal with the pain of it years later. I look at that, and I see the fact that there are still many, way too many men in the world who are proud of that, I think, or at least think that they should be proud of it. And it disgusts me, to be honest. I see that, especially, you look at something like last week, I feel like that is largely tied in. I mean, I know that that's really a gross oversimplification, but I do think a lot of not only toxic masculinity, but the desire to preserve it is at the root of so much shit right now. So it's hard to not be self-loathing in that regard, and it's hard, I feel, to think that there is, a positive approach. I'm not saying one can't be positive, but I just don't know what would be a positive masculinity, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know what it would be. I don't know how that would any different from just being a good person, as I was saying before. Yeah.
And just for context, listeners, last week was the attempted coup here in the United States. And yes, while you were speaking, I kept seeing it from, I think where you're coming from is that so much of masculinity is tied into a fear, kind of a fear of the other, whether that is whatever form that will take. So then do you have a similar loathing for what would be considered feminine?
I mean, I would say, just to be like completely honest about it, I would say that I certainly, like I said, I was way more misogynistic in years past, and I definitely harbored like ridiculous ideas about women back then, but I wouldn't say I have any of that now. I don't view, in fact, I view femininity almost to the point of like why would you want anything else at that point? But I don't, that's obviously a very like outsider's view, I guess. I am not going to pretend to understand the experience, so I also at the same time don't want to like idolize femininity as much as I do love dearly a lot of the women I have in my life, actually, but it's not something that I think I can say I really like it. I don't know, it feels out of my place.
Right. We don't want to fall into that. And I think it's a masculine trap of thinking of women as either the whores or the Madonnas.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of them as the Madonna, you're raising them up to that level of sainthood, and that in of itself can also be, while it sounds wonderful and glorious, it inherently holds some toxic things, because then the relationship is, in that case, is usually that you want this person to take care of you,
right? Because
that's what a god would do. That's what a mother figure would do, and then on the other end, the whore, in the masculine view, I'm very sex worker positive, so this is not to do with that at all, but the whore and the masculine view, I think, is more about I am giving this person something, so they have to give me something in return.
Right.
And it's never, but it's not as it's not as it sounds easy in the technical sense, but it's not, because it's often very unequal in what the give and take is there, and on both sides of that equation, whether it's the whore or the Madonna. So yeah, we can't fall into those traps either. So what is your view of femininity, to sort of flip the question from earlier, if you even have one? Again, gray is okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of my general thought that, I look at those qualities, the I guess the cliche qualities that you may find in a book. And again, I think that a lot of those are just things that are indicative of good people. I certainly obviously understand that because of the way most of us are socialized, there's going to be recognizable masculine and feminine traits in people that goes way back beyond any single person's comprehension. But because of that, I definitely understand what the words mean. But if you, for example, caretaking or I don't know, expressive, emotional, what else? Understanding, compassionate, things like that. I just think that those are desirable traits in anyone. Maybe a feminine person may express them a little more outwardly, but I don't know. I think like a forward thinking desire would be that those are just positive traits anybody would have. And I do find those traits definitely in feminine individuals. I obviously find those traits more, but that's again because I believe that they are raised that way. They're socialized to be that way. And granted, I'm not the one to be talking on that for sure. Like I'm super unqualified to be talking about that. That's at least how I see it. As much as I love what I guess feminine features tend to be, I wouldn't lie if I said sometimes. I would be lying if I didn't say that sometimes, like the more lackadaisical nature that I enjoy as a man, because we're kind of allowed to be lazy, is sometimes fun. I think there are certain social things, because of the way they are, that does, kind of impact what you take out of the experience as your gender. But obviously a huge portion of that is just male privilege. So I'm not going to say it's really like a good thing necessarily. It's just that I won't lie, and that sometimes it's fun in like a childlike sense. I don't know.
It's interesting you brought that up. I was going to eventually come to the point that, because you did give us some ideas of masculinity, femininity from your background, whether you agree with them or not, whether you think they're more humanist or not, then I was going to pull in the fact that you say that you have more female friends than male friends, and if that is because you feel like if the women in your life are embodying more of those humanist traits, or if the men just are not, or if you and yourself are feeling more one gender or the other, and then maybe you're clicking with people who sort of either are similar or perhaps different, where the connections are.
Right. Let me see.
I know it's a lot to unpack, though.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it I think is just that, I mean, honestly, like on a very plain level, most men bore me. it's not so much that they offend me or bother me, really. Most of them just bore me. But in terms of like who they are as people, there are only a few men I can think of in my life who I am a really good friend with, and I don't know. I think about it sometimes. Just the fact that, like, why is it so difficult to have like an honest relationship with another guy? It's just not. I don't know why. I mean, I know why, but it's kind of frustrating, and it's even me. It's like it's not anybody else's. It's not any one individual's fault, I think, because even me, like when some person, when a man comes up to me sometimes, like I could think of a guy at work, for example, and we've bonded a lot because we've gone on a couple of business trips together. We go out, we shoot, so we're in a production team, but and there have been times where like we're getting drinks and he like divulges something really personal, and I'm not going to say it because it's his business, but he'll get into something really personal, or he's even said, like, he passed me on the back and he's like, "Oh, I love you, man." And to me, I'm kind of like taken aback, because it's like, I'm very happy to see that. I'm very happy to hear that. But at the same time, it's so unexpected and so unusual. At least in most of the interactions I've had. Yeah, and it's like it's funny because it's like I almost have to remind myself how to react in the moment. Feel like, "Oh yeah, I love you too, man." And then but it sounds so fake because I have I have to like take my thinking cap off about what just happened, I guess. But yeah, it's weird. Like expression in general is just so not only hard, but so infrequent that it's weird. And I think, yeah, and I guess in that sense, it really is like a muscle that's atrophied. You literally don't know how to use it.
And I can speak from the gay community a little bit, and when I say a little bit, I mean purely just my observations as a gay man and being part of the community. I actually have I have mostly men in my life, very few women. But and while it's a little easier for me to tell another, and I noticed this recently, it's a little easier for me to tell another gay man my feelings with him and open up a little bit more. However, there is a straight man in my life that I've for a long time have considered a friend and then a good friend, and only very recently I started telling him that I love him as a friend. And every time it's about to come out of me, I just feel it, like it kind of crawls from the pit of my stomach and I feel it going up my esophagus and then out, because it's something that I do feel and I want to express, but to say it to this person is just so, like you said, alien.
Yeah.
And I don't know if maybe that's the same feeling. You laughed a bit, so is that sort of the same feeling that you have when you're returning?
Oh, absolutely.
Those affections?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I I really want to, especially now, because we're in COVID times, so having honest connections is incredibly important now. But I really want to be more proactive, I guess, in having those kinds of conversations with other men, and also, and it doesn't even have to reach that level. Just even the like frequent small talk and actually checking up on people, all the little things that indicate that you are a caring friend and individual. Those just don't exist. Like, I'll go months sometimes without talking to some of my friends, and I mean, it back a few years ago, it didn't really bother me that much, but now it's starting to like kind of occur to me, like, no, this is something I need to do, because, well, for one, otherwise it's not going to get done, but what kind of friend am I otherwise if I don't?
Well, does that go back to the very start of this conversation with the technological versus the in-person? Personally, it's easier for me to have long conversations when I'm with someone in person than even Zoom or Skype or what have you. Even if I'm seeing them and we're talking, there's something lost. I need the 3D person in front of me
For sure.
to be able to connect. And I don't know, is that part of it for you, or is it just, am I missing the mark here?
That's hard to answer. I'm not really entirely sure. You know, one of my favorite things about being able to type everything, and I think this is another tangent that I'll come back to, but the reason I do like to type everything, I think, is because you can really truly think out what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and
which goes back to you wanting to be a little bit of a perfectionist. Maybe I'm just guessing.
No, I actually was thinking it as soon as you said it. I was like, oh, the dots are connecting.
This whole conversation is just very circular.
Exactly. Where was I going with that? I'm not. I don't know, and I know I've been saying that a lot. Repeat the question, please. I'm just like lost in thought.
The question was essentially about, is it easier for you to connect in person versus digitally?
Right. Sorry about that.
And that could be small talk or longer conversations, although I focused on the longer conversations.
I think, thinking about just how small talk goes, it's definitely way easier for me to do it online, because there is none of the awkward standing around, trying to think of the next thing to say, which, by the way, is why I hate the indications that say you're typing. Well, there's a few reasons I hate that, but like in person, unless we're already in a flowing conversation where things are just coming out like one after the other, that's one thing, and I love that. But if we're not at that point, if we're not like really conversing fluently, everything feels very deliberate and like I'm thinking of all the gaps in speech and the pauses that are uncomfortable, and like, who should say something, and is my lack of saying something an indication that I'm a boring person to talk to?
This is very interesting because I'm actually very much the opposite. I appreciate someone who can appreciate the silence. And this was actually gifted upon me by this song from Penguin Prison. Can't remember the name of the song, but the lyrics go, "Don't you think it's strange that we say the same thing every single day, every conversation? I just need someone I can spend my time with. We don't have to talk. We can just be silent."
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely understand the value of that when it comes to, I guess, a significant other, because I would want somebody I can simply be myself and relax and not have to be on edge. But when it comes to friends, for some reason, it's harder for me to let go and allow the silence to just be there. And I think part of that, just, I'm sure it goes back to, being like kind of an unpopular bullied kid. It's like, I think that like, oh, well, I guess nobody wants to talk. Must be me. So I'm sure there's a lot of that in there. It's hard. Yeah. Like if there's a silence in the room and somebody isn't talking, it doesn't have to be me, but if somebody isn't talking, it's, I don't know, kind of like physically discomforting.
And I think that's one of the beauties of our men's group, that we're able to have these conversations in groups, because there are certain members that we all know who are a little bit more the wallflowers, but they're listening, and when they do speak, they speak with importance. And then there are people who are more the drivers of general conversation. But we are all contributing to this, for lack of a better word at the moment, machine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I really am meaning to get into more of the meetings, and I'm very sorry, by the way, that I've been so flaky on those. So that's kind of part of what I was getting at before with having to be more proactive. You know, the spaces may be there, but unless I go, what good is it doing me? And the same thing with people. You know, there are people in my life, surrounding my life, who I don't hate. I'm not going to have those greater relationships and understandings of who they are unless I take that step. So yeah, there's a lot of self-discovery in 2020, to say the least.
We've had a lot of time to sit with ourselves and think about what makes us happy when we're alone and what we want when we do get to be with others.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Well, Doug, this has been an awesome conversation. I feel like we could go for a lot longer, but I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I don't want to have to edit too much.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about it the whole time. I know exactly what it's like to be in those shoes.
But again, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I hope to see you at a meeting soon so that we can grow closer. We
will. And when is the next meeting, actually?
The next meeting, today is, day of recording is January 15th. The next meeting will be next Thursday, the 21st. And every other week, it alternates between Thursday and Wednesday. So it'll be the 21st, cool. Then the 27th, then the 4th, etc. And we have a meeting on the second Sunday of the month at noon for people. If they can't make a weekday meeting, we do have a weekend option.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I do remember you mentioned the Sunday option. Okay. I will, I'm really going to try. I'm really going to try to make it. I honestly really enjoy not just the conversations, but the, I guess, knowing the reality that other people, well, other men, I should say, have to also air their grievances and their, just share what's going on. It's nice. It's, and I hate to, I guess, pigeonhole the project in this way, but as someone who has been looking into therapy options but cannot have insurance that supports such options, yeah, I know I'm insured and I still can't. It's ridiculous, but that's another conversation. It's nice to be able to get those things out somewhere. So, and thank you for having me, by the way.
Of course. If perhaps in a future season we can have you back on again and hear some of these updates on how you're doing emotionally and with your music career.
Yeah, we'll see if it's a career. It has to start. But I appreciate it.
All right, Doug. We will see you soon. Thank you for joining me here on Masks of Masculinity.
Thanks for having me.
A big thank you to Douglas Guerra for being my first guest on Season 2 of Masks of Masculinity. Feel free to say hi to Doug on Facebook, and you can check out Parliament Cat on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/ParliamentCat. Next time, we'll have with us a longtime Detoxifying Masculinity member, Lancelot Brown. Until then, if you're man enough for you, you're man enough for us.